So today is December 20th, I think, Sunday, and we have the chance today to try a new camera. So I contacted Fuji to see how will the new Fuji medium format will behave in my hands. So I'm super excited to see this. I'm going to share some behind the scenes pretty soon. I'm going to meet the rep, see the camera, try it, and then let you know. Hey guys, Evans B here. So as I said earlier, the good people at Fujifilm lended me their new medium format camera, which is a beast of a camera. So my plan today is put it to the test. So as you probably have seen from the background, we have set up the studio to shoot. We also have a comparison compared to my old camera, which is the Nikon D810, which is still a great camera with 36.3 megapixels, and I got a phone. So before I got a call, as I was saying, we are going to test the Fujifilm against the D810 because it's still the camera I use. I like it. I did not want to upgrade yet to the D850 before looking at the Fujifilm because I feel that my work needs a bit more camera than what it has right now. I'm changing my style to a lot of shadows and a lot of blacks and a lot of dark stuff, and currently I'm struggling a bit with the D810 as I can't push the file as much as I want to. And if I heard the arguments from Chris saying the reason why he shoots with a Pentax or medium format is because he can actually push the file to its utter limit without too much loss of the quality. So that's the first part. We're going to do a studio one because I think medium format really shines in the studio. But there's going to be a part two where we're going to shoot outdoors. So for today, here's the studio one. Hope you guys enjoy it. I will also be giving my commentary in the behind the scenes. So take a look. If you have any questions, fire them down below, and I'll see you in the video. Cheers. What's up guys, and welcome to the behind the scenes. So I started with this session with the Nikon because that's where my zone of comfort was. I knew I could replicate whatever I wanted to with the Fuji, so I decided let's start with like a comfortable position where I'm really able to manipulate the camera as much as I want to, and then we'll evolve to things that are more complicated, like the Fuji. So started regularly just positioning my light. Also, you probably noticed that I'm using a lot of black here. So if you look on the left, I'm using a V flat as a negative flag, plus I'm using an extra negative flag just to make sure that there's no loud light bouncing around between the subject and the actual flag. Because the goal again was to push the Fuji as much as possible to just give me as much shadows as possible while still doing a nice portrait. So I can show that the Fuji can recover very well in the shadows. So I start with modeling light. We measure, we test, we just make sure that everything is exposed properly, and then we get to shooting. So I do have to admit that I was struggling a bit with the Fuji at the beginning. There was two things that were really driving me crazy, and that's not a negative thing. I didn't know the camera because I went in there cold as if I never touched the camera, and I was going to test it against my usual camera, which is maybe a bit unfair to the Fuji, but I wanted to see how it handled because I already own a Fuji X100S previously, and I thought it would be a similar experience. While it's a bit of a different camera. The reason why is on top of the Fuji, there is a exposure compensation for if you flash, if you know TTL, let's say, you know you can maybe adjust slightly your TTL readings to give it either more exposure or less exposure. And that thing was flickering like crazy, and it was showing in the studio as -5, and the display wouldn't display anything at all. It would be just black, like you would see some hints of things, but it would be completely black. Turns out that I didn't know how to handle the camera, and there was a bit of there was a setting that I didn't do right, and then I had to correct. Afterwards, everything was gravy. The camera handled pretty well. The only thing that I had to get used to again, because you know DSLR you can control the aperture with the front wheel, well the back wheel, sorry, and then the front wheel is the shutter. In this case, I had to think that if I want to change the aperture of the camera, I had to use the front ring of the lens, which is something I'm not really used to. Again, I am from the DSLR age. I'm not that old school, I'm sorry, but it's something that I get used to, and also changing the shutter speed with the manual dials. It looks pretty good though. Like people see the camera like, oh man, what's that? It's a big camera, but it looks vintage and it's like old dials. Yeah, it's pretty cool. The kit that I was given was the 63 millimeters from Fuji. I was also given the 32-63 millimeters and the 110 millimeters from Fuji. I figured the 110 was very similar to the 85 that I had in my kit, so I decided to let's bust out the 85 millimeter and let's try it with the 85 to see the comparison, because I'm a portrait photographer and the 85 is the lens I use the most often with the 35. So I decided, you know what, let's stick to the 85, let's do some shots with this and then see how it yields. So you'll see the actual lens, the 110 is a huge lens, it's humongous. It looks really good though. I mean, it's a sharp lens, and especially the fact that it shoots at f2, which is major for a medium format. The sensor is bigger. It tends to have a very tight depth of field. So if you shoot very shallow, like in this case, then you can lose your focus, and like literally, like you could be very sharp here in the eyebrow and completely lose the eye. It's something you have to be careful of, that I had to get used to. But again, it's with the eye focus that's in the camera, it was pretty effective. I personally find it slightly annoying because I'm not used to it yet, but the camera compensates for also the focus by selecting the eye and then selecting it actively. So you can see two squares. You'll see one square choosing the face, and then the second square checking the eye. But overall, the camera has a great feel. It has a great, it's easy to manipulate, especially if you can remind yourself that the ISO is controlled by one point and the shutter speed is controlled by another point, and the aperture is controlled by the lens. You'll get used to it very quickly. I just wanted to give a bit of comment about also the accessories. So this is the camera itself. You see it similar size as a DSLR, nothing too wide, like another medium format, say a Mamiya, which has a huge back, and because of the interchangeable back. This one also has a flip screen. It's not completely rotating, so you can't really do a selfie with this. It's not the point, but again, it's nice to have a tilt screen. Also, I was landed a battery grip to use with this camera, which is cool, but I'm not really used to it because it doesn't behave like a DSLR. Usually DSLR would sit on top to have your shutter button, but this one sits inside, which is a bit different, which I had to get used to. Again, it doesn't feel terrible at all. It actually feels great. It's something that I have to get used to. My only criticism of this camera is the buttons. The buttons are very shallow. I have thick fingers for some reason, like sausage fingers, and that is probably due to powerlifting and weightlifting, but just pressing them, you don't really feel them as much as a DSLR, which are really popped out and you can press. That may be due to the fact that each of these buttons are customizable, so you can really choose what button, what function you want to assign. Even like the dials, you can assign what you want to do with them. They don't have any names on it, so that's a big advantage that this camera has. That it's fully customizable to like the nth degree, which is great. But you can't really feel your way through. So whenever you're looking for the let's say for the IF that you set, then you have to like kind of search for it, which is slightly annoying. I don't want to think about where my button is or if I feel it. I just want to be like, oh, this is it, bang, AF, bang, I shoot. So that's my only really negative point, is that I wish that it would stick out a bit more. But other than that, it feels great. The eye view feels great also. You can also change this for a waist level finder. So that's really cool. That's something that I haven't seen in a lot of cameras nowadays, is that you can shoot like this, especially if you're really tall, like, or you over 6'2", I'm not, but or you shoot at low angles. If you're very much into sports, you will shoot at low angles because you want to get your hero shots, which I did many times in my career, my short career. Other than that, it's a great feeling camera. Everything feels snappy. It feels super solid. If you drop this, you don't feel like it's gonna break. Again, I'll show you the inside of the sensor. It's humongous. It's really also close to the lens. Apparently, the closer the lens is to the sensor, the better the image results are. That is a claim made by Fuji directly, not mine, so please don't hate me on this. It's really what I heard. That's what I heard. But again, and the lenses all quality, they all feel good. See, I snapped it without even almost looking, so it's something that's really great. Also the batteries tend to last a while. So when I was doing a test shoot and I was trying to find out how to turn off that exposure compensation, I played with the camera on live view for like 3 hours and a half, and I didn't burn through the battery, which is a good thing in my opinion. Changing the battery like 5 times over in a set can be annoying. And I remember my days with the X100S when I had those small batteries, which I had to carry like 4 when I was traveling, because they would burn out in like 2 to 3 hours of not continuous shooting, but at least having it on and off. And also one special thing about this camera, which is now a common feature, is the switch. If you, let's say, tend to raise the camera to your eye, the camera will switch from the back viewfinder, sorry, to the eye finder. So, which is something that you can appreciate. I tend to trip it sometimes because I use my thumb, let's say, in this manner, and I will lose the screen, which is a bit annoying. I wish it was less sensitive, but again, that might be me not used to the camera handling and not comprehending that, hey, don't put your finger there. As to the video, I'm not a video guy, so I'm gonna have a hard time reviewing this. It only does 1080p anyways, which is something that you can probably neglect at this stage in the game. There's not that many cameras that are released that don't even do 4K. I have my Google Pixel 3 and it does 4K without an issue, so why 1080p? Maybe you have it, maybe it's cool. I'm not gonna go into there's probably some guys that reviewed it. If you guys want me to review the video mode on this, let me know. I'll get someone that is really good at it. But as of me, again, 1080p, nothing special. Maybe it's good, maybe it looks good with the Fuji filters. I would think so, but I'm not gonna put money on it, and I'm not gonna talk about it more than this. And one highlight we have to mention about the Fuji is the ISO performance. So I wanted to test how the ISO behaved under really tough conditions, and I did about 3 shoots with this one, and somehow I shot at ISO 1600 and the shots came out super clean. But I'm talking about like it's actually usable and you can publish and no one will criticize you. I was strobing and flashing and all good, but at a certain point I saw, like, I was having my modeling lights on, and so this shot looks really good. It's just underexposed because I'm using my modeling lights. So let me crank up the ISO and do a little test. I went up to ISO 1600 as one of my friends recommended, and I took the shot, and I came back to my computer and I was amazed at the fact that this camera can give me shots that are usable at 1600 ISO. So this is really something that I respect out of Fuji. It's an amazing feat that they did of having that much larger of a sensor and ISO performance being that high. And also, full disclosure, this battery grip that I was given is not the final form. That is a demo, which is not the final version. So I didn't have experienced any problems with the demo, but apparently this is not the final version. So take my comments with a grain of salt. It's not the final version. It's just a battery grip that was given, which really helps shooting upright, because this position is a bit uncomfortable. Although it's doable when you're doing upside down, this position, if you like to have this screen on top, is a bit difficult. So I would recommend getting the battery grip if you do get this camera. But yeah, it's a demo, don't judge it for it. It just worked great for now. Just the button placement again is a bit strange, and the buttons are not, again, overall they're not feeling very correct, but I think that's something they can fix with the second model. One thing though that is really attractive about the Fuji is the price. I mean, it's a $7,000 camera with a lens, which is really affordable. If you compare, if you go into the market for used cameras, let's say for a medium format in the similar range of prices, you can only get, let's say, a Phase 1 IQ 140, Phase 1 IQ 40 for the similar price of $5,000 plus a lens. So I think it's one of the better bargains for medium format, which was the main reason why I was attracted to the system. Affordability, we know that Fuji makes some incredible cameras. The lenses are sharp. The lens is pretty affordable, if I may say, especially for the smaller form factors like the XH1, sorry, XT3, etc. The lenses are not that expensive, and you know that a JPEG that comes out of a Fuji is something special. It's like they put the little sauce in there and it just comes out like magically, like look like film instead of looking like a very sharp DSLR photo. So right now I'm going to show you a couple of comparison shots. I did find that the Fuji tend to crush the blacks, but I mean really dark. I'm not sure if it's Capture One that's playing with me or that was the way that the files were handled, but as soon as I looked at a Fuji photo and I took a shot with the D810, like the comparison was like, what am I doing something wrong here? Am I changing the scene so much that it doesn't read the same thing? I mean, the D810 will have like a very decent gradient from shadow to expose, let's say, but the Fuji would have expose and then boom, shadow, which is something I'm not used to yet in the studio. I'm used to, like, let's say, DSLR overcompensating for something, or maybe that's me, that's the way camera reads. But my experience is that the Fuji really tends to put a lot of shadows where I tended to, but not as much as I thought that it would do. So maybe that's me, that's mishandling the camera, but overall it tends to give you exactly what you give it, which is something that it can be scary if you tend to mess up your lighting setups a bit. So that would be a word of caution for those who are not super experienced. Don't jump into the Fuji yet, but wait a bit, getting some more experience with your lighting. Even I made some mistakes in that shoot, and then when you get used to it, then maybe that camera will be for you. So in terms of files, again, it's impressive the file recovery that the Fuji can give you. So if you, like I said previously, the shadows are very deep in the Fuji. I mean, I thought like I missed my exposure sometimes, and then if you want to recover, then it recovers pretty neatly without much of loss of quality. I mean, nowadays most DSLRs do that, and it's not really an issue anymore. Not like back in the days when if you have a Rebel XTI or Nikon D31. But nowadays with newer cameras, you can really push anything to beyond what was imaginable back in the days. As to the colors, again, Fuji colors are very special because of the film simulation that's inside of it. Again, you have the classic chrome, which is like the standard in Fuji, everyone loves it. But some shots that I had looked orangey for skins, which is not something we're looking for specifically. We want something that is accurate, and they came out a bit off color compared to the model. So you see the model is Vietnamese origin. She's not necessarily very pale, but not completely orange neither. So I was having a hard time understanding why was the camera not doing skin tones properly. But again, if you shoot raw, you can maybe play around with this and correct it for the issues that it might give you. Other than that, also the files are pretty large. I'm used to, let's say, 7400 long edge for a DSLR photo uncompressed, and right now this camera, I believe it gives me 8300 and thus, which is much larger than my current camera is. And the reason why medium format is interesting is not only because the pixels are just bigger, it's also because the sensor is bigger, which means more information, richer colors, better prints. People don't know the reason why some prints look better than the others. Is one, yeah, of course, it's the guy behind the lens, but there's also the fact that your sensor is bigger and it captures more information, and it just looks better in print because you're basically something that is really large and compressing to something that is really small-ish or low quality. So it just tends to magnify everything and cook it to the juice of the printer, and then add the camera, and add your filters, and add your processing, and add your lighting, and then you have something marvelous. So that's my studio review. Again, in the studio, it's quite fun. I had to turn off some settings to make it more appreciable because I was not used to the camera. I had to turn off the live view exposure assist, because the camera tends to, let's say, if you shoot in natural light, it tends to give you the exact reading that you're seeing, which you don't want in the studio because you won't see nothing. And basically it'll be just completely black because there's not enough light coming in. So I had to turn it off. I had to turn off also the the eye focus, because I'm not used to it. I prefer running it exactly like my Nikon did, but whenever it kicked in really well. It wasn't too annoying. I'm just not used to it yet, maybe in the future. So that is mainly it. Again, I'm gonna post a couple of side-by-side photos there, but so I'm gonna put the Nikon D810 against the Fujifilm GFX 50S. Personally, I like the Fuji. It's a good camera to have. I think it's a good beginner or maybe your first entry to the medium format system without one, breaking the bank, and two, making you scream for your hair. I did notice that I tend to miss focus a bit because again, if you shoot super shallow like at f2, you will definitely miss focus a bit without using the eye or the focus. So that may be something I recommend if you shoot super shallow, but I tend to typically shoot at f5.6 and more because I like really sharp photos, and if you use a long enough lens, you still have some depth from your subject, so that's not something you should worry about, but that's what I noticed in my experience with the Fuji. So that's it for that part. Again, I'll be shooting again in the winter outside with the Fuji to test it outdoors, because I want to see one specific function. Is one, apparently that camera can handle rough weather, so we'll see about that. And two, it can sync to really fast sync speed. I'm talking about 8,000. So we're gonna put it outdoors to see it perform and see how well it does in some outdoors condition, because other than the studio, of course, it's outside, and outside is really interesting. So we'll see how it behaves, and I hope to catch you in the next video. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions, fire them below. Cheers and good luck.